My grandfather, a man of bizarre architectural taste, left me his house in ostentatious, turn-of-the-century structure outside of Denver. The house was famous, or infamous, in local history because of a long-ago scandal involving my grandfather, an architect, and the unusual way the original owner died. The original owner, Elias Thorne, was a Victorian scholar obsessed with time and memory. He had hired my grandfather to build him a secure subterranean study, a room where time could be controlled and memory preserved. The story was that Elias was found dead in that study in 1904, not of violence, but of acute, accelerated aging. He looked 50 years older than his actual age. The official cause was listed as a cerebral hemorrhage caused by high pressure, but the workers whispered that the room had pulled his life out of him. The study was sealed off, its entrance hidden behind a massive tilting bookshelf in the library. As the new owner, I found the latch, and driven by curiosity and a desire to reclaim the space, I opened it. The air that rushed out was cold, dry, and tasted faintly of ozone and old paper. The study was a simple circular room, entirely lined in mahogany shelves. It had no windows, but in the center, there was a heavy, ornate brass desk. On the desk sat a leather-bound journal. I picked it up. Elias Thorne's final entry read, "The Room of Fixed Moments." I have sealed it. The world outside moves too fast. Here, I can study the past. I can keep things. Perfect. I have built the machine in the wall. I just need the power source. Next to the journal was the machine. It was a circular copper device built directly into the back wall, covered by a hinged brass plate. It looked like a nautical instrument, with dozens of tiny numbered dials. I decided to restore the room. I spent a week cleaning the study and started on the brass device. I quickly realized it wasn't a machine for measuring time. It was a mechanism to change it. The dials were labeled not with hours or minutes, but with dates, year, month, and day. I didn't dare touch the dials. But I did find the power source. A single, heavy, fist-sized piece of quartz crystal, tucked into a velvet-lined compartment in the desk. It vibrated faintly in my hand. When I placed the quartz into the central socket of the brass device, the entire room hummed. The dials began to turn, slowly, silently, clicking into a position I didn't recognize. The 17th of October, 1904. The humming stopped. The air felt heavy, and the silence was absolute. I turned off the lights and left the study, pulling the bookshelf shut. The next day, I noticed the first shift. My favorite, highly expensive leather armchair in the main living room, which had been worn and cracked, was now pristine. The small, scuffed area on the left arm was gone. It looked brand new. I ran to the kitchen. My coffee mug, which I had chipped yesterday, was whole. I rushed back to the library, pulled the bookshelf, and hurried down to the study. The dials on the brass device still read the 17th of October, 1904. I sat at the desk and flipped through my calendar. I was currently living in 2025. It seemed the room was applying a correctional time field to the objects in the house, pulling them back towards the date it was last set, 1904. I found a new entry in Elias Thorne's journal, written in a different, more confident hand. The initial phase is complete. The room's boundary is expanding. Objects near the core revert fastest. If I can hold this moment, I can live forever in this perfection. I reached for the brass dial marked year and tried to turn it forward to 2025, but it was locked. I tried to pull the quartz crystal out of the socket. It was also locked in place. That night, I started feeling the shift in myself. I looked in the mirror, and the faint lines around my eyes seemed to have deepened. My hair, which I had just dyed, looked faded, the color duller. I felt tired, weighted down. I realized the horrifying truth. The room wasn't just fixing objects. It was correcting the passage of time. Objects were reverting to their state on October 17, 1904. But living things like me were still moving forward in chronological time, while being simultaneously exposed to the room's reverse aging field on the house. The result was an accelerated aging process. I had to get the crystal out. I went back to the study. As I stood by the desk, a faint scent of old pipe tobacco wafted through the air. I saw a subtle distortion in the air near the mahogany shelves, a translucent flicker like heat rising from pavement. Then I heard a sound, faint and dry, a cough. "You've activated my little project," a thin, reedy voice whispered from the distortion. "But you mustn't tamper with the settings. We're nearly at perfection." I backed away, terrified, and saw the vague outline of a figure standing by the far wall, tall and gaunt, dressed in what looked like a dark, old-fashioned suit. "Elias Thorne, get away from me," I shouted, throwing the heavy brass paperweight from the desk at the apparition. The paperweight passed straight through the figure, hitting the wall behind him with a dull thud. "The perfection is in the moment," Thorne whispered, his voice gaining strength. "If the house can be restored, I can restore myself. I need the energy you bring. Your modern, fast-moving timeline is a battery. I was aging at an exponential rate just by being near the crystal." I looked at my hands. They were visibly drier, the skin looser. I grabbed a steel fire poker from the corner of the room. It was cold, solid. "The room is protected by time," Thorne scoffed. "You cannot break the machine." "Maybe not the machine," I said, my voice hoarse, "but the power source." I swung the poker like an axe, not at the machine, but at the fragile, velvet-lined base of the brass desk where the crystal was connected. The metal struck the wood. The sound was not the sharp crack of wood, but a low, vibrating clang that shook the entire room. The copper device on the wall sparked. Thorne shrieked, a sound like dry autumn leaves being crushed. "The connection! You'll tear the moment." I hit the base again, harder. The lock holding the crystal fractured. With a wrenching, metallic scream, the crystal flew free from the socket. It landed on the carpet, pulsing once, then the light in it died. The humming in the room stopped. The heavy, pressurized air instantly vanished. I stood there, panting, the fire poker still in my hand. Thorne's ghostly figure was gone. I slowly walked back upstairs. The armchair was no longer pristine. It was back to its worn, cracked state. The chip was back in my coffee mug. The house was back in 2025. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale, exhausted, but the accelerated lines were gone. I had aged, perhaps a few months' worth of stress in that short time, but I was alive. I took the crystal, wrapped it tightly in lead foil, and drove it deep into the desert, burying it under 5 tons of concrete. The Subterranean Study is sealed again, and the bookshelf is bolted shut. But sometimes, when I walk through the library, I can still smell that faint, sharp scent of ozone and old paper, and I wonder what moment Elias Thorne was trying to cling to. And I wonder how much of my life I left behind in that cold, perfect room.